In this country, there's a huge advantage, though. I mean, these people are extremely well educated here compared to. I'll criticize my own country compared to my own country.
Yeah, and resourceful. Here, people seem to get things done with less ideal conditions than in other
innovation always
places.
comes from necessity. It never comes from abundance. Once you have abundance, you don't need to focus. You don't need to innovate. So I think Russia has an innovative, let's say, gene somewhere, because the conditions in history have forced Russians to be innovative. I think the authoritarian management style has prevented that. Now, if that is being removed, there's a potential for that to flower. The other big thing as well, compared to our countries, is it's a collectivist culture as opposed to an individualistic culture.
Yeah.
And I think if you look at most Eastern countries as they're going through this, they have an advantage because they already focus on the connections between them.
I would agree with that.
And I don't think you need to manage the connections. The connections are there. Again, you just need to make sure that you put boundaries around where those connections are. But people will figure these things out themselves, potentially much quicker here than in our countries. This might be a turning time, or it might be a shift from the center of economic or corporate power, more east. It's a question for Russia that's always been looking to the West.
Well,
Or should it look to the east now?
let's look. There's a lot of innovations that have come out of this part of the world faster. And if you look at, I mean, we do a lot of work in the banking industry. We launched the first mobile banking, smartphone banking in Russia in 2007. I was in a conference in the US in 2012 where Wells Fargo was launching the exact same functionality.
5 years later.
5 years later. If you look at the sophistication in the banking industry here in terms of channels and product functionality, sales processes, operational efficiency, the average number of customers per bank branch, let's say the global best practice is probably about 6,000-7,000 customers per branch. In one of our banking clients here, we had 13,000 customers per branch, almost, well, let's say twice as efficient. If you think of the cost model on that, it's dramatically different.
Why hasn't Russia therefore become more powerful from a commercial perspective? Is that because there hasn't been the need to be any better than that? And do we have that need now?
Well, I don't know. I mean, even looking at things like service quality, customer centricity, I mean, the level of thinking and the awareness in it is, I would say, much more sophisticated than most countries in the West, even though they've been using the vocabulary longer. If you look at quality of service in restaurants, I mean, I have friends that go to Western Europe and come back and say, we had a horrible time in France in a restaurant, and they come back and they're happy to go to a restaurant here because the quality is actually much more reliable, and there's a different focus on it. I would say a lot of that is due to the speed of change in these markets over the last 15, 20 years. If you look at the way things were 15, 20 years ago and how they are today, there's been a massive improvement. But the speed of change has also created a dependency for the next new thing and the next improvement, and why isn't this better yet, and so on. So it's made consumers that are very demanding in terms of, I should have this and I should have it this fast and I should have it with a smile and in my best interest and so on. So,
but has management not kept up with this? Because management tends to, if you want to be a manager here, you'll look at most top managers, they have a Western MBA education.
Yeah.
But having a Western MBA myself, they just teach you how companies used to be successful.
Exactly.
And that environment is not necessarily the same environment here, and it's definitely not the same environment as what we're going to be experiencing over the next months and years. So perhaps the management is now going to be the technology that needs to evolve quickest.
I think consumer behavior is going to drive the change, and I think there's probably going to be some, let's say, evolution of business model crises as well. Businesses go through their development curves and so on, and jumping from one developmental phase to the next is usually very difficult.
And now it's going to be easier because
now the stimulus is there, and the old model clearly doesn't work, right? And those people going back to the old model will very quickly find that the old model doesn't work or is no longer relevant. And so I think the balance between a business model and customer preferences, behavior, needs, and so on. That balance is often kind of hanging at the end of these development cycles.
Yeah, it's often a tag on, isn't it?
Yeah.
But perhaps I don't know what phase we're at in terms of our 5 steps that you need to take, but
No.
one of them would definitely be now seeing the world through what your users need.